You opened your retirement account this morning, didn't you? Maybe right after the news alert came through. Maybe before you even got out of bed. And the balance staring back at you was lower because oil is spiking, because markets are pricing in the worst, because every headline about US-Iran escalation reads like a countdown. That tightness in your chest right now, it isn't weakness. It's 200,000 years of human survival wiring screaming at you to do something, anything. Move the money, get to safety, stop the bleeding. Here's the problem. The thing your nervous system is about to tell you to do with your 401k is almost certainly the worst possible decision you could make this week. Not the second worst, the worst. And I'm going to walk you through exactly why, what's actually happening inside your brain right now, and what 50 years of crisis market data says you should do instead. Let me set the scene because the specifics matter. The US-Iran conflict has escalated into territory markets weren't pricing in at the start of the year. Drone strikes on American military installations in the region, retaliatory airstrikes, tanker disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows. Iranian officials have threatened to close the strait entirely. When that particular piece of geography gets threatened, every market on Earth pays attention. Brent crude jumped more than 8% in a single week following the initial escalation. Energy stocks lurched in both directions, sometimes within the same trading session. The S&P 500, already trading at valuations not seen since the peak of the dot-com bubble, started pricing in what markets hate above almost everything else: open-ended uncertainty with no obvious resolution timeline. Your 401k feels every tremor. Here's what the behavioral data shows in the weeks following any major escalation. Retirement plan administrators report sharp spikes in account logins and participant call volume after each major headline. According to the Investment Company Institute, the pattern looks almost identical to what emerged during the tariff shock waves of early 2025. People log in compulsively, stare at their balances, refresh the same screen, and make allocation decisions from a psychological state that has nothing to do with their actual retirement timeline. Hardship withdrawal requests tick upward. Contribution pauses increase. And in Vanguard's ongoing behavioral research, the investors most likely to change their allocations during a market disruption are consistently the ones checking their accounts most frequently. Not for better information. Every login simply hands their brain another opportunity to interpret a falling number as a threat requiring immediate action. This isn't irrational, it's deeply human. And it has played out with near identical results every single time geopolitical crisis has collided with retirement savings. Consider the Arab oil embargo of 1973. Crude prices climbed more than 300% in a matter of months. The U.S. stock market lost nearly half its value between 1973 and 1974. Inflation surged to levels not seen since World War II. Investors who moved to cash during those dark months locked in permanent losses. Investors who held their positions or kept contributing through the worst of it captured the full recovery that built through the late 1970s and accelerated into the 1980s. The market did not wait for any of those investors to feel emotionally ready. It moved on its own schedule. The Gulf War of 1990 produced almost the same script. Oil spiked sharply in the days following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. The S&P 500 fell roughly 20% from peak to trough over the following months. Panic selling was widespread and clearly visible in fund flow data. Then the recovery came, faster than almost anyone predicted, and investors who had repositioned to safety missed the majority of it. History doesn't repeat in precise detail, but the underlying pattern across every oil shock, every military escalation, and every regional conflict of the past 75 years is remarkably consistent. Geopolitical shocks cause real economic disruption. Markets price in the worst-case scenario aggressively and early, and investors who respond to the crisis itself almost always underperform investors who respond to their own timeline instead. The US-Iran situation is real. The oil supply risk is immediate. The downstream effects on consumer prices, corporate earnings, and market sentiment are real. None of that is being minimized. But here is what 50 years of crisis market data makes unmistakably clear. The conflict itself is not what destroys most retirement accounts during a geopolitical event. What destroys them is the decision made in the 3 to 5 days immediately after the biggest drop, the panic sell near the trough, the contribution pause that starts as temporary and quietly becomes permanent, the full reallocation to bonds or stable value that locks in underperformance for a decade. The actual mechanism is the response to the headline, not the headline itself. TIAA's behavioral research on crisis period allocation changes confirms this directly. Participants who altered their allocations during peak volatility windows significantly underperformed those who made no changes at all, not because the changers lacked financial knowledge, because they were optimizing for how they felt in the moment rather than for the timeline their retirement actually operates on. Their investment horizon was 15 or 20 years out. Their emotional decision window felt like 48 hours. That gap between the timeline your retirement needs and the timeline your nervous system thinks you're on is where the real damage gets done. And the reason that gap exists has almost nothing to do with how closely you follow geopolitical developments, or how financially literate you are, or how many years you've been managing a retirement account. It has everything to do with what's happening inside your brain right now as you follow the headlines. Stay with me, because once you see the mechanism, you can't unsee it. There is a small, almond-shaped structure deep inside your brain called the amygdala. It sits at the base of your temporal lobe, and it has been doing essentially the same job for 200,000 years. Scanning your environment for threats and triggering a response before your conscious mind has time to deliberate. When your ancestors heard movement in tall grass, the amygdala didn't wait for a full threat assessment. It fired immediately. That half second of pure instinct is why they survived long enough to become your ancestors. The problem is that your amygdala cannot distinguish between a lion in the grass and a geopolitical crisis moving across your phone screen. It processes both as the same category of input. Threat, immediate, requires response now. And this is where the US-Iran conflict becomes neurologically different from an ordinary market correction and more dangerous because of it. Random corrections feel like weather. They roll in, they roll out, and while they're unpleasant, there's no narrative for your brain to attach to. No villain, no timeline, no escalation ladder. Your threat system activates, but it can't build a mental model of what comes next, so it eventually quiets down. Geopolitical crises are the opposite. They come with identifiable actors, stated intentions, public ultimatums, visible escalation timelines. Every new headline is a data point your brain uses to predict the next threat before it arrives. Research from the University of Michigan has confirmed something that feels counterintuitive but is neurologically precise. Uncertainty about an anticipated negative event triggers a stronger anxiety response than actually experiencing the negative outcome. Your brain would almost rather the market crash immediately and be done with it than sit in the suspense of waiting for the next military development to move crude prices again. That is the specific torment of following a geopolitical crisis in real time, while your retirement account is open in the next tab. Your threat detection system isn't just reacting to what already happened. It's bracing for what's coming. And bracing for a threat activates almost identical physiological responses to experiencing the threat directly. Here's what that looks like in your body. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, rises. Your heart rate increases. Blood flow shifts toward your muscles and away from your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long horizon thinking, delayed gratification, and abstract reasoning about future consequences. Your palms get clammy. Your focus narrows. And from that exact physiological state, you are about to make a financial decision that will compound, in one direction or the other, for the next 20 to 30 years. A landmark study from Caltech, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, examined 2 rare patients with bilateral amygdala damage. These individuals could evaluate the expected value of financial gambles with perfect rational accuracy. They understood risk in the abstract, completely, but they showed a dramatic and measurable reduction in loss aversion compared to matched healthy controls. They simply did not feel the fear of losing money the way everyone else does. The researchers concluded that the amygdala isn't peripheral to loss aversion. It is the mechanism that generates it. Loss aversion, across decades of behavioral economics research, is also asymmetric. Losses register roughly 1.5 to 2 times as strongly as equivalent gains in psychological experience. A $15,000 drop in your retirement balance doesn't feel like losing $15,000. It feels closer to losing $25,000 worth of emotional well-being. A $15,000 gain, by contrast, produces a modest upward blip and then fades. Your attention is structurally biased toward the red. Research from NYU using fMRI imaging confirmed that loss aversion correlates directly with amygdala activation. More importantly, the same study found that when subjects used emotion regulation techniques, consciously reframing how they interpreted their financial situation, amygdala activation decreased measurably. Less fear response, less loss aversion, better decisions. The reframe itself is the intervention. Now let me make this concrete with 2 people. We'll call them David and Rachel, and they're composites of the patterns showing up in plan administrator data right now. Both had $280,000 in their 401k plans when the latest escalation hit hardest. Both watched their balances fall 12 to 16% across a brutal 2-week stretch. Both got the same alarming push notifications. Both felt the cortisol. Both had the same conversation with themselves at 11 o'clock at night about whether they were being reckless by staying in. David moved everything to a stable value fund. He couldn't take watching the number fall anymore. The moment he hit confirm, he felt an immediate and genuine wave of relief. His amygdala stopped sounding the alarm. The threat was neutralized. He told himself he would move back in when things settled down, when it felt safer. Rachel did something that felt, in her own words, genuinely insane. She kept her automatic contributions running. She didn't change a single allocation, and she felt terrible every single morning when she checked the news. Quick interruption. If you're getting value from this, hit subscribe. I cover the intersection of behavioral finance and real-world money decisions every week, and these are the videos people tell me changed how they handled the next downturn. Now back to David and Rachel. While David sat in cash watching the market move without him, Rachel's automatic contributions kept running. Every 2 weeks, her paycheck bought shares at prices significantly cheaper than 6 months earlier. She was dollar cost averaging through a crisis, accumulating more shares per dollar than she could have at the pre-crisis peak. When markets recovered, as they have across every geopolitical disruption in recorded history, Rachel was whole, more than whole. David wasn't. The data makes this outcome predictable, not anecdotal. Research from JP Morgan's Asset Management Division consistently finds that investors who attempt to time the market underperform a fully invested strategy by 3 to 5 percentage points annually. That sounds small until you compound it across 20 years, at which point it becomes the difference between a comfortable retirement and a lean one. BofA Global Research has shown that missing just the 10 best trading days over a 20-year horizon cuts total returns roughly in half. Half the outcome, gone, because of 10 days. Here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The 10 best trading days in any extended volatile period almost always occur immediately adjacent to the worst days. They cluster together. The recovery often begins before a single headline acknowledges it has started. So if you sell during the worst stretch to protect yourself, which is exactly when selling feels most rational and most responsible, you will almost certainly miss the best stretch too. You cannot take one without the other. But the initial panic sell is only part of the damage. What follows tends to be quieter, slower, and often more expensive. David told himself he would get back in when things settled down. As the market recovered unevenly, the way it always does, his brain kept generating reasons to wait. The price at which he sold became his anchor. Every time the market climbed above it, buying back felt like paying a premium for something he once owned cheaper. His amygdala, soothed by the exit, now treated re-entry as a new threat. Maybe it'll dip again. There was always another reason. The months accumulated. He stopped opening account statements, changed the subject when coworkers mentioned their portfolios, told himself he was being patient and strategic. He was actually waiting for a validation that the market had no obligation to provide. He never got it. That isn't a discipline failure. It's a well-documented psychological mechanism called the disposition effect combined with anchoring bias, and it is entirely avoidable, but only if the structural solution is in place before the crisis hits, not after. Here is what that structure looks like. First, automate everything, then close the app. Set your contribution rate to the maximum you can sustain. Set your allocation based on your actual retirement timeline, not this week's oil price. Target date funds rebalance automatically as you age. Then stop logging in. Research from Betterment shows that investors who check their balances least frequently during volatile periods consistently produce better long-term outcomes, because removing the human override is the entire point of a system designed to work without it. Second, reframe what is actually happening. The NYUFMRI research showed that cognitive reappraisal, consciously changing the frame around financial information, measurably reduces amygdala activation. Instead of telling yourself you are losing money, try telling yourself you are buying the same assets at a discount. Instead of telling yourself the market is collapsing, try telling yourself volatility is the admission price for long-term returns. Those phrases sound like affirmations, but the research treats them as cognitive interventions that change your brain's biological response to the same data. Third, if you are within 5 years of retirement, hold 2 to 3 years of expected living expenses in stable assets, short-term treasuries, money market funds, bonds, so that you are never in a position where you have to sell equities during a downturn. This is structural insulation, and it has nothing to do with timing the market. Fourth, if your employer offers a match and you are not maximizing it, a geopolitical crisis is among the best possible moments to increase your contributions. You are receiving free money from your employer while buying assets at reduced prices. Your amygdala will object. Your future retirement account will not. The investors who build the most wealth through periods like this are not the ones who made the smartest moves. They are the ones who made no moves at all. You felt that tightness when the Iran headline came through. You opened your retirement account in the same breath. That was your threat system doing exactly what 200,000 years built it to do. Now build the structure that keeps it from making your retirement decisions for you. The conflict will do whatever it does. Markets will drop further or recover. You cannot control any of that. What you can control is whether you retire with the outcome your timeline was always capable of producing, or whether you let 48 hours of cortisol make that call instead. Drop one word in the comments. Holding, if you're staying in. Selling, if you're not. I read them. And if this changed how you're thinking about it, the next video on screen breaks down the exact automation system I just described, step by step, so the next crisis can't reach the part of your brain that makes the wrong call.